We are live. Thank you for tuning in to Naijha Speaks. I'm Naijha Wright-Brown, your host, and I'm here to help you. So let me help you find your vegan soul through food, people, events, and culture. Ha. Today we're going to learn how to green restaurant and cafes. Vegan Restaurant Month is coming up in August, so welcome Kenzie Bushman of Better Food Foundation. Kenzie Bushman has been serving as the outreach manager at the Better Food Foundation since May of this year. Congratulations, Kenzie. Kenzie holds a master's degree in professional communication, specializing in nonprofit leadership. With over a decade of experience in the nonprofit sector, Kenzie's experience spans across various domains, including animal rights, event planning, woo-woo, education, and homeless services. After Kenzie's presentation, please feel free to ask questions or comments. So we'll save that for after the presentation. We'll address as many as we can. Please like and share this live segment. Take it away, Kenzie.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Naijha. Thank you for having me and be able to share some information about our program. So I'll go ahead and share my screen here so we can get started. All right. Excellent. So, as Naijha said, I am the outreach manager for the Better Food Foundation. And for our presentation today, we'll be discussing how we can cultivate sustainability by default with DefaultVeg. So I've been with BFF for about 2 months, so I am fairly new. So for those questions after, I'll definitely answer those to the best of my abilities. But if for any reason there isn't anything that I can answer for you right this second, I'll get your contact information and be sure to get that answer to you either as soon as possible today. So we'll just jump right into it. So the Better Food Foundation used to use the terms plant-based defaults, default veg, and greener by default a little bit interchangeably, but now we do kind of use exclusively default veg because we actually now have a sister organization called Greener by Default who consults with institutions to apply default veg to their food menus. So it's just a little bit different tactics that we use at BFF. So just wanted to clarify that a little bit. And then as I'm sure most of you guys are aware, our food systems are wreaking major environmental harms. So more than 8 billion humans are alive today, and that number will continue to grow. We need to feed ourselves in order to survive. And as a species, we've chosen to do so using animals. And so I really like this quote by Dr. Jonathan Foley of the National Geographic. He says, when we think about threats to the environment, we tend to picture cars and smokestacks, but not dinner. But the truth is, our need for food poses one of the biggest dangers to the planet. So there is one sector in particular that has an outsized impact. So globally, animal agriculture uses 77% of farmland and produces 57% of all food-associated greenhouse gases. But the production only is 37% of the world's protein. So plants produce most of the protein, where animals produce most of the emissions. So here you can see why. So the most carbon intensive foods are animal products, being beef, lamb, and cheese, having the highest carbon footprints of any foods. So chicken is often promoted as the sustainable choice, but its carbon footprint is certainly lower than beef, but it's still 11 times greater than plant-based proteins like peas and lentils. So luckily, there is a simple way to help by eating and serving more plant-based meals, which have a carbon footprint of half of those of animal-based meals. So when it comes to reducing carbon footprints, serving more plant-based foods gives us the most bang for our buck. So it has a much bigger impact than other interventions we typically think of, like reducing or eliminating single-use plastic. Though, of course, those are important for other environmental and social reasons. So you can see here, the biggest impact that can be made is switching from beef to veggie, followed by reducing beef portion size by 25%. And what we kind of think of as zero waste kind of has no sustainability interventions. So luckily we're headed in the right direction. Plant-based has been a top trend year after year. So over the last 4 years, plant-based menu items have increased 800%. In 2021, 62% of households bought plant-based products. And in 2021 as well, 36% of Americans reported having recently reduced their meat consumption. So who is driving this trend? So largely it is young people and omnivores. The vast majority of millennials and Gen Zs are already eating plant-based foods at least 1 to 2 times per week and want to be eating even more. So that's what's most exciting to me on this chart on the right is a whopping 98% of consumers who buy plant-based meals also buy animal meat. So this is actually great news because it means that we don't need to have everyone go vegan. We just need to encourage this existing trend that is called flexitarianism, where omnivores realizing that they don't need a huge hunk of meat at the center of their plate every single meal in order to be happy and healthy. So this is the core of our work, making it easier and more appealing for omnivores to choose plant-based options, getting outside of that paradigm that vegetarian food and vegan food is only for vegetarians and vegans. So how do we begin to encourage this shift? So our program was inspired by the book Nudge by Nobel laureate Richard Thaler and Harvard professor Cass Sunstein, in which they examine the profound impacts of defaults and nudges on human behavior. So a default is the option people end up with if they do not make an active choice. So for instance, I'll admit that I still have the same ringtone that my phone came with because I never bothered to go in and change it. And people tend to stick with the default or the status quo, partially because it's just one less decision to make, and partially because it's seen as the more socially acceptable option. We have this subconscious assumption that if most people are doing something, it must be the right thing to do. We are social creatures. We like to fit in, and the surest way to do so is sticking with the default. So a classic example of the power of defaults is organ donation, where in Germany, people are by default not organ donors and must actively opt in. And so the participation rate in Germany is about less than 20%. In Austria, which is relatively culturally similar to Germany, people by default are organ donors and they must actively opt out. So the participation rate in Austria is over 90%, which means that they are obviously saving many, many more lives by switching to this default. So here's an example that's directly related to sustainability. Looking at the energy sources that businesses are using in the control condition year one, businesses were signed up for conventional energy by default and had the choice to opt into renewable energy. So you can see that nearly 100% of businesses stuck with the conventional. And then for the experiment, they flipped it and made the renewable the default with the choice to opt out into conventional energy. So about 70% of businesses stuck with the renewable when it was the default, and that stayed consistent over time. So these people weren't willing to just put in the extra time and effort to specifically request it, but they're happy to stick with it when it's the default. So when you combine these two ideas of plant-based foods and default, you get DefaultVeg. So this concept is simple. We're looking to flip the norm. So right now, just about everywhere meat is the default. People have to specifically opt into veg options, which is usually only that of, strict vegetarians or vegans putting in the time and energy to do so. So we're looking to flip that, to make plant-based the default and give people the choice to opt into meat and dairy. So this way, everyone still has complete freedom of choice. Nothing is taken off the menu, but the more sustainable option is the default. This strategy is flexible. It can be implemented in any environment where food is served. It's also cost neutral and can even save money. It's also much more inclusive. So knowing that you can sit down with your friends, families, coworkers, and enjoy a meal that's delicious, nutritious, and meets your dietary needs is a powerful form of inclusivity. So serving plant-based foods with the option to add meat and dairy includes everyone by default. It includes the 30 to 50 Americans who are lactose intolerant, the majority of whom are people of color. It includes Buddhists, Hindus, Jains, Rastafarians, Seventh-day Adventists, and more who may be vegetarian, and Jews and Muslims who do not eat pork. It also includes young people who eat more plant-based foods and communities of color. Black Americans are actually more than twice as likely to be vegan as white Americans, and a third of Americans of color reported reducing their meat consumption in the past year compared to a quarter of Americans overall. All right. So this is also an extremely effective strategy. So a study conducted at a series of conferences in Denmark looked at the impact of defaults on meal choice. When meat was the default and people could request a vegetarian option, on average, 94% of people stuck with the meat and only 6% requested vegetarian. But when vegetarian was the default and people could request meat, an average of 86% of people stuck with the veg and 13% opted into meat, which is an 80% increase in veg meals served simply by making them the default. So better yet, the attendees had positive feedback about the food. If the menus had been entirely vegetarian, then about 13% of people who went out of their way to request meat likely would have complained and not been satisfied. But because meat was still available, the hardcore carnivores' needs are still being met. And while the vast majority of people are happy to stick with the veg default. So this huge increase in plant-based meals served translates into significant carbon and water savings. So if a company with 1,000 employees that serves lunch every day implemented plant-based defaults over the course of a year, they would save 9 million gallons of water with either no cost or cost savings. In comparison, installing low-flow toilets for a company that size would save 600,000 gallons of water per year with an upfront cost of 15,000. Similarly, plant-based defaults would save 350,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent with either no cost or cost savings, while a 240 kilowatt solar array would save 275,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent with an upfront cost of $360,000. So what does this actually look like in practice? So next we'll talk about the different strategies that can be used to implement plant-based defaults in different types of food service settings. So the core concept of this strategy is to make the base of the meal plant-based and give people the choice to opt into meat and dairy. So if people are RSVPing to an event like a conference, it's a clean switch and just state that the meal will be plant-based by default and offer a box to check to request meat. The same way that people would do to request maybe a vegetarian or a gluten-free option. And then if food is served buffet style or family style, then what we would do is have all of the plant-based entrees first and the meat and dairy at the end of the line. That way people will naturally fill up their plates with plant-based options, and then the meat and dairy will be at the end as a garnish rather than the bulk of the meal. And then if people are choosing from a set menu, make the base entirely plant-based and offer meat and dairy as add-ons. This is already very common for restaurants that make like salads and bowls where the base is veg and then you pay an additional $3 to add chicken, for instance. So when it's not possible to make the base entirely plant-based, you can create the perception that plant-based is the default by offering a minimum ratio of 2-to-1 veg to meat options. So in a recent study found that 3 out of 4 options are meat-based. Only about 12% of people will choose the veg option. This is because when there's only one veg option, omnivores perceive it as the veg option being for vegetarians. So if I'm not a vegetarian, I might think, oh, that's not for me. And it can be even altruistic. At many companies, the veg option runs out, so the vegetarians go hungry. Because if an omnivore takes a veg meal, that's one less for the vegetarian. Whereas when there are several veg options, suddenly it becomes about whether I want, let's say, a black bean enchilada, chickpea curry, or pasta primavera, whatever I'm like feeling that day, as opposed to if I identify as being a meat eater or a vegetarian. So subtle substitutes are another easy and effective strategy. So serve plant-based condiments, milks, desserts, and breads by default. So this is inclusive because it meets the needs of those with allergies, dietary restrictions, and those who otherwise would be left without creamer for their coffee. Trying to make a lettuce wrap out of, someone who really wants a sandwich. It's also indistinguishable. So nowadays the products are so good that people won't even realize the difference. We worked with one university who's trialing a vegan brownie and found that in blind taste tests, the students actually preferred the taste of the vegan brownie. Plus it was much cheaper to make and had a lower carbon and water footprint, and more students were able to eat it. So that's definitely a win-win. It's also less expensive. So if you're baking at home, it's cheaper too. It's, for example, just being able to use oil for cookies and brownies instead of butter. And then when there's a printed menu, ensure that plant-based options are incorporated into the main menu and that it's the first option in each section. So this simple change can increase selection of plant-based items by 56%. And that's because if I'm an omnivore looking at the menu on the right, I can see that the vegetarian section and think, oh, that's only for vegetarians, so I'll just stick with the normal menu. And I don't even look to see if the options in the vegetarian menu sound good. But when they're incorporated into the main menu and listed first at a glance, looking at the risotto primavera, it catches my eye, sounds delicious, I'll order that, maybe not even noticing that it is, in fact, a vegetarian meal. So another impactful strategy is labeling foods with names that are focused on taste, texture, and provenance. So rather than vegetarian, vegan, meatless, healthy, low fat, things like that, some people think that vegan meals means it's going to be less delicious or less filling, and others think that it's just for vegans. So if I'm not a vegan, it's not for me. We actually worked with a software company that after seeing this presentation, they changed an item on their menu. So they initially had it as a vegetarian hummus wrap, and they changed it to a roasted red pepper, avocado, and hummus wrap, and sales immediately increased. So another way to think of this is imagine that you looked at a menu and saw a celiac bowl. You might not order that unless you have celiac disease or are gluten-free. But if you saw a Thai peanut rice noodle bowl, you might order that because it sounds delicious and not even realize that it is in fact gluten-free. Same goes for vegetarian and vegan. So LinkedIn implemented climate-friendly ratios and taste-focused labeling in their San Francisco office with Greener by Default team. As a result, they were able to serve half as much meat per person while maintaining high diner satisfaction. They also implemented an oat milk default in their coffee bar, cutting dairy milk from 70% to 18%. So, we'll just hop on here. So in the New York City Health and Hospitals, they piloted a plant-based chef special as the default patient lunch and found that more than half of all eligible patients opted in, which is approximately 95% of patients who chose the plant-based option were definitely satisfied with their choice. The program is so successful that they implemented it into the dinners as well. So if an average city follows in New York City's footsteps by serving plant-based meals by default, they can expect to cut its food-related emissions by 40% and water footprint by 24%. So a city serving 1 million meals per year could save the equivalent emissions of driving a passenger car over 1 million miles and the equivalent water of 4 million showers. So this approach can work in any food setting. So in businesses, in catered meetings, micro kitchens or cafeterias, in university faculty meetings, conferences, in dining facilities, in organizations, meetings, events, or just even a group potluck. We also work with conferences, restaurants, and cafes. So here's the process that we go through. So we start by analyzing your existing menus, then provide a menu of strategies to choose from. Once you've selected the strategy you want to test, we can design a pilot to fit your specific goals and food service environment. So you'll definitely be in good company joining a growing number of institutions implementing plant-based defaults, such as Stanford Medicine, Harvard University Office of Sustainability, Northwestern School of Law, New York City Health and Hospitals, and Sustainability Washington University in St. Louis. So we'd love to work with you. So for more information, you can visit betterfoodfoundation.org. You can also email me at kenzie@betterfoodfoundation.org. And then this QR code will also give you more information as well. So definitely reach out. I'd be happy to help with anything that you have. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kenzie. Oh my God, I'm so glad that you used my platform for this amazing presentation, and I have a lot of questions. So I know we had someone commenting saying hi, Tom. I see you there. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get a little bit closer and personal. Here's my first question.
Okay.
With such supportive data on the DefaultVeg initiative, what is the reason or excuse from some institutions not wanting to default to veg? I know working in the Maryland Vegan Restaurant Month space in the celebration, sometimes, and we do this twice a year, sometimes we hear chefs, they just hate it. They hate to hear about me. They hate to cook vegan. They've been taught this meat heavy culinary training. Like what's going on out there? I'd love to hear.
You know, the biggest thing that I've really seen is just that hurdle of change. I think that no one really likes to change. You know, they want to stick with what they are already doing. Change can be hard, but change can be transformational. And that's really what we're pushing, because obviously in so many regards it is benefiting you know, the environment, individual health. I mean, you know, the list goes on. So that's really the biggest thing that we're seeing.
Change, folks. Without the change, we can't grow. And we see what's happening with the environment. So if you don't want to change, something's going to change you. So got to get on board. Exactly. Is there any data behind why the Gen Z is leading the charge, especially since many of them, I know I have, been parented by those consuming animal proteins and milk?
Yeah. You know, I think that, you know, the Gen Z are just so much more aware of what is going on in the world. You know, they came out with eyes wide open. Like I've been working with students for the past like 6 years, and I couldn't even begin to explain how much different they are from previous generations. You know, I mean, in so many different regards, they are just so passionate, and I love seeing that they are open to those changes. And, you know, they're pushing their parents to you know, eat more plant-based and try, you know, some of that really delicious food.
Yeah, I know I'm pushing my mom, and she's doing very well in the plant-based space. And we have an 11-year-old daughter that's been vegan since she was born. So she's really good at selecting the food she wants to eat and asking the appropriate questions to make sure if the items she's consuming are vegan. And we're just so happy. She hates sweets, so she's definitely not a sweet tooth. Lactose intolerance and defaulting to plant-based milk initiatives. Can you talk about what you're doing to help cafes with that? Do you have an initiative that you're pushing?
Yeah. Yep. So we currently have a campaign that we've been running for a couple of years to get oat milk as the default instead of cow's milk. There are actually quite a few cafes that have started doing it. Blue Bottle, Stumptown. There are a couple that have initiated that, and then we've also been able to get some pilots in universities in the U.S. With the work of students that we've been doing in addition to some other organizations that we're working with, like Factory Farming Awareness Coalition. And, they've had really great success. But it's so nice to be able to, as someone who is lactose intolerant, being able to go to a cafe and not having that default be something that you literally cannot consume is so much more inclusive. And so, yeah, we definitely are really pushing that. We were working with a lot of different cafes, and hopefully, with opportunities like this, the word is going to get out more, and we can get more people on board with oat milk being the default.
Yes, and some of these hotels, because staying at the hotels and not finding even just soy milk, and I'm a fan of oat milk, so I'm so happy oat milk is out there, but just finding one option at hotels that are charging, whatever they're charging per night. Some of them, these high-end hotels, they need to do a better job in that area, because in this day and age, you should at least have silk, something.
Yep.
So appreciate that. Where do we go from here? What should I or could I be doing more to push the needle? And thank you again, Better Food Foundation, DefaultVeg. They are the presenting sponsor for Maryland Vegan Restaurant Month. Okay, so go to mdveganeats.com to find out more about that. And Better Food Foundation is the presenting sponsor of this year's Vegan Soul Fest, August 19th and the 20th. You want to go to vegansoulfest.com to find out more about that. They have an amazing installation where they're going to be highlighting folks that are flipping food norms. So you're not going to want to miss it. But what do I need to be doing? And Naijha Speaks, Black Veg Society, what should we be doing?
Yeah, so we have a ton of resources on our website. So definitely check us out at thebetterfoodfoundation.org. And definitely let us know, if there is anything that you have questions on. I would love to work with you about getting, some oat milk defaults in your local cafes. We can send you form letters to reach out to cafe managers. We can, give you like one-page data that we can, like literature that you can give to the cafes. We have a lot of resources to be able to help individuals get active in their community, trying to basically push this default veg program even further.
I appreciate that. Definitely want to connect with the organization. Something that you talked about, menu item names, it didn't even dawn on me when you talked about the hummus wrap and it being named vegetarian. Sometimes when people see that, they're like, oh, this is going to be so boring. But then when you highlight the ingredients that are in there, it changes people's minds. I co-own the Land of Kush, so I know everything is in the name and the taste, to help people gravitate towards and to be a believer that this is not rabbit food. It tastes good. It's flavorful if it's done well and right and labeled correctly. Kenzie, I really do appreciate you coming on today, and I appreciate all the support from Better Food Foundation. Is there anything else, that you wanted to say? You're a co-host, take it over.
Yeah, please, for those of you attending Soulfest, please come and stop by the Better Food Foundation booth. We're going to have a lot of really fun things going on. We'll be launching our Flip It, which is our new program. We'd love to share some information with you. And yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to hear from you guys.
Everyone, please like, share. Talk to your favorite if you are a vegan, vegetarian, flexitarian, or reducitarian, any Aryan in the food space that wants more plant-based options on the menu, you need to have your favorite cafe 100% vegan. They got it. If it's veg friendly and they need to be a little bit more veg friendly, please have them work with Default Veg over at the Better Food Foundation. Go to betterfoodfoundation.org. Trust me, you are going to love it. It's not that complicated, folks. Okay, default to veg.
Yes.
And on that note, make sure you're out in Maryland in August. Join us at the launch party. Go to mdveganeast.com for all the information. And please get your tickets for Vegan Soul Fest. They are selling fast. vegansoulfest.com. Hey, Tom. Yes, more segments. Bring her back. Tom says, please bring her back. Absolutely. We're going to bring her back, Tom. Thanks for tuning in. Max, you are so excited for Vegan Soul Fest. Awesome. Make sure that you stop by Better Food Foundation's tent because they're going to be taking over the place. Okay. Well, be safe, and drink water. It's hot out there, y'all. Have a good one. Bye.